Welcome, everybody. Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights here with Rich Klein. What happens when you buy an expensive hobby box? You open up all the packs and you have all these cards there. What do you do next? Rich and I are going to bat around the dilemma of you got hopefully a couple of box hits, maybe even a case hit, but then you got a whole bunch of other leftovers in many cases. Talking about Prism and some of the other medium to high end brands, not the one pack per box kind of products, but you got a bunch of cards and what are you going to do with them? So we're going to talk about that after thanking sponsors, Topps, Panini, and Upper Deck that make the cards, Heritage Auctions, Hugs and Scott Auctions, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Burbank Sports Cards, ComC.com, and Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication. So Rich, $1,000 box, somebody bought it, they opened it up, they got the cards sitting out there. What do they do with the big cards? What do they do with the small cards and everything in between? I have my ideas, but I want to hear from you first.
I'm sitting with my friend Ryan from RJ Dukes in McKinney. I'll sit with him every Dallas Card Show for an hour or two. I learn what's going on in the new box world. Sometimes he brings a lot, sometimes he'll bring just extra inventory. At the last Dallas Card Show, he had not the hobby, because they were still at the store, but the mega and a second type of 2024 Panini Prism football cards. He was $9.95 a box at the store. And I decided to look it up later. And it was somewhere in the 1400s at Dave and Adams for the same hobby box. And for those who don't know, what's causing the spike in Panini Prism hobby is the one per case, what they call color blast hit. It's a really nice card. I identified one of them at ComC the other day. Oh, this is the color blast card that's causing all this hoopla. Okay, cool. So I actually got to see what one looked like on a visual screen. Then Ryan was saying, these cards are X amount of dollars per card out of the box. Why are they so cheap? We'll call them dollar boxes. I'm sure some of them are in $3, $5 holders, but we'll just call them, for our sake of discussion, dollar box cards. Why are people so willing to take losses on the cards they're pulling if they don't get the hit?
What do you mean willing? They can put the price anything they want, but they're going to sit there. If you try to price your cards based on what you have in them, you're creating a museum effect. They're going to say, oh, that's a nice looking card, but I can buy it over here for a lot cheaper. And you can say, well, yeah, but I bought this out of a box that was $9.99. I've got $83 in this card. So, well, you may have $83 on average in your cards, but I'm not going to pay that. I'm not even going to pay $10. So you're going to lose money.
And as John Keating says, the secondary market remains undefeated in these situations.
Well, ultimately, but it's a free market. And what has been exaggerated is the extremes on the high end, and it pushes down, because what it means, Rich, if nobody was willing to sell those non-glamour cards, if everybody banded together, which they can't do in this industry, not collusion, but if they just said, you know what, I don't want to take a loss on these cards, but a bunch of people are willing to take what is effectively a loss. You said it, a lot of them are going to wind up in the dollar box. Now, not if it's a low serial number or a more difficult insert, but a lot of these cards are going to find their way into a dollar box, even though nominally you're paying $10, $20, $30, $40, $50 on average for some of those cards. But if you got a $1,000 card, then do you feel good about it? I feel bad about it when cards are not priced in a way that makes sense. If something's too cheap or too expensive, both those things bother me.
Our mutual friend, Rob Veras, one of your sponsors, always used to talk about barrier to entry in anything. And I think one of the hidden secrets to the over era explosion, we'll call it 86 to 95, was that if you bought a 50-cent pack from Topps in 88, or even a dollar pack, not that they were $1 in 89, but 90 or 91, a dollar pack of 15 cards from Upper Deck in 90, you're paying 6 cents a card. For the commons, so you sell your common for a nickel, that's pretty close to that price for the people building their sets. Then your stars, you're getting the quarter, 50 cents, a dollar, to the rookies, a couple dollars for it. You had a more balanced way of getting your money back from any pack you open. Where in today's world, as you're pointing out, you're not going to get the same balance. You have to hope for the big hit or big hits.
That's the reason they're buying them. Here's the thing. If you want to get a big hit, the only way you can do that, other than paying big bucks in a showcase, say, I want that one, is to buy into a break or break your own box and have a chance at that. Otherwise, the marketplace has dictated that If you're looking for base cards or for pretty good cards, just go to the dollar box or find the dealer that pulled the color blast and thought, I got nothing in these others. I'm just going to get rid of them. They're the two philosophies of when you buy a collection, Rich. We've talked about this. When you buy a collection, many people think, okay, I can get my money back by selling these few cards, that I just take them and I get all my money back and the rest of the stuff is gravy. Most people do that. I did the opposite. I said, here are the cards that I really like, the better cards, and I'm going to try not necessarily get all my money back, but I'm going to try to get as much as I can back from the cards that I don't want, that I don't think are that good, and that I don't think are going up in value. And I'm not dumping them, but I'm probably taking a loss. And if I got half my money back, but I had the cards there I really wanted, it's like I got the cards I really wanted for half price.
I think you also had an advantage over a lot of other people in that you were better capitalized. If I buy a $500 collection, at least in those days, I've got to try to get my $500 back with as much alacrity as possible. Then whatever the gravy is, that's my profit. You were in a better position where you could say, I'll get 300 back on what I really don't want. And then I'm into the really juicy part of the collection that might be worth $2,000 for $200. And you were thinking that's a better way to do it. And if you have, we'll call it the money or a good job or whatever, that is actually a pretty good way of looking at the business.
In the 70s, I was subject to that too. My cash flow was not great in the 70s. I had to sell enough, and I generally had slightly positive cash flow in my years, but I was a single professor. I had some disposable income, but not to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on collections. So most of the collections I bought were hundreds of dollars. So it's easier to get your money back. And cards were a lot cheaper in those days. My point was, though, whether it's then or now, you knew what the better cards were, the ones you're really excited about. And if I'm excited about it, then other people are also going to be excited about it. That's what's happening now. It's just that the chase for these lottery type GOAT cards has just stretched things out of shape. When we did our price guides, it seemed like some of the higher price cards were undervalued and some of the lower price cards were over. When you went to sell, you couldn't get above the book price except for a really tough card.
Just remember, especially before I came down there, but in the late 70s and the 80s, most people who were dealing actually were also collectors for a long time.
Yeah.
And if you're a collector before you become a dealer, which is actually the better way to do it, especially in those days, you knew from experience which cards you had trouble getting, unless it's one of these freaky things, fluky things like in St. Louis, they didn't get 6 series 67s, but they got a lot of high numbers. That was a little bit fluky. But so in 6 series 67 St. Louis, where they won the World Series that year, and you're not that far away from when they won the World Series, you're going to have people really wanting those cards. But other than those, you knew which cards were tough to get in 67 high numbers or 66 high numbers, or even 61 or 62 high numbers. You knew from experience which cards were tougher.
Again, your cash flow argument is sound, except that if you're a collector, as opposed to being a dealer, a collector is willing to sustain some negative cash flow. Like I said, I have negative cash flow in my golf game. I don't make money playing golf. I pay for balls. I pay to get on the course and all that stuff. So I don't think, hey, I got to break even on this. No, if it's a hobby, you could be spending some money. If it's a business, you're thinking, hey, I just spent $500 on a collection. That's my stash. I need to get that money back so I can replenish my coffers. First base was like that. I've mentioned some of the managers and people we had work in the store loved buying collections. I talked about this with Mike Fruitman. They loved it. And he said, hey, cool it. We got no money left. They were so busy buying cards, they didn't have time to sort the cards and get them back out for sale. So put a hiatus on the buying just for a little while. Oh, but it was too good of a deal. So, well, just call me if you think it's too good of a deal.
I've owned and managed stores way back in the day. And I said, look, if it was something I really wanted, I would do my best not to let you walk out that door.
Exactly.
Actually, Gervis would say the same thing. If it's something I really wanted, I would tell them, we will work this out. You're not walking out the door. He told me some story of some monster collection he once bought. In those days, it was insane money for a collection. He says, no, I want this. We're going to work this out without you walking out the door. I forgot if he called you or called somebody else.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but like I said, there's the hobby aspect and then there's the dealer aspect. And I don't know that I'd call it investment, but sometimes when you're really in business, You've got to spend money. You can't budget. Only going to spend $100 a month on cards if you're in business, because there could be some spectacular deal that comes in that's $500 or $1,000, and you just would be foolish to pass on that. But
Well, that's
what happens a hobby, people go to a friend, like you said, and say, hey, can you backstop me, or can you come in with me on this?
that's what I like about the boxes you and I go to. I have my budgets when I go to the Dallas Card Show. And
Yeah.
I know which dealers I'm usually going to go to. And I know my budget for any show. There are times I've been tapped out at Thursday night at the Dallas Card Show. And I may go for another day or two, but it's like, I got no more money left. I've tapped out for this show.
I just realized I'm reverse budgeting. I don't have a budget for the show, except that I know how much I spent the last show and the show before, and that's how much money I bring. You know this because you've seen me in action. I'm buying almost the same amount of cards. It's 100 cards an hour at every show I go to.
And you have a report, as I do, the people you're buying from, and you know what percent they're going to charge you.
Exactly. And I know how many cards I'm going to pull. So
you know how many cards
determine.
Every once in a while, something might come up, but with the way these people are turning over merchandise, it's the same every show.
I'll tease this now because we're not going to do it because we won't have time. But I've thought one episode I want to do with you, so you can be thinking about this, and listeners can be thinking about this too, is how much would you pay, or how much would people pay you for you to do certain hobby activities? People would have to pay me a lot to sit behind a table and sell cards. Okay. Now, don't tell our buddies that we frequent that I would be willing to pay to, not just for the chair, but I'd be willing to pay per hour to sit at a great dollar box. Our singles club buddies, if they were to charge me $10 an hour, I'd say, I'll take 10 hours worth or something, because I have so much fun. If they said it was $20 an hour, I'd probably still say it. Now they said $100 an hour. I said, wait a minute, I'm going to pull $100. I'm going to pull 100 cards an hour. Now I got to think about that. How much would you pay to do some fun activities in the hobby? I pay to go to the movies. This is better than going to the movies.
Yeah, it's cheaper too.
Better than going to the ball game.
Cheaper too.
And cheaper. So yeah.
It's funny with the singles club. A couple years ago, I was at the singles club on a Saturday morning. I got there and I had to leave. We were doing hobby hotline, so I was going to be there for 2.5 hours. And I guess people would know to look for me there. And I think they have 8 or 10 people stop by buying cards while I was there. Meanwhile, I'm chatting with them all. I got to buy 9 cards in 2 hours, and I apologized.
Okay.
And they said, Rich, how many people did you bring to the table? 9 or 10. And how much have they spent? Quite a bit. Why you take those 9 cards, okay? You made us a lot more money than those 9 cards.
Yeah, it's the economy of the card show and all that. But again, I think some people are saying, you know what, I'm not going to buy boxes. Now, enough people have to buy boxes, otherwise we've got a problem. But the breaking has been a creative way of fractionalizing that. But there has to be a home for every card. You can say base cards are no good, except that base cards of premium products are very nicely designed and creative and good, and they don't even have to be a parallel. And some of these inserts, if they're 1 per pack, they're no good. If they're 1 per 4 packs, they're not that great. If they're 1 per box, they're pretty good. But you know that, and you know that going in the dollar box. If you see them or don't see them, there's just not high enough demand, Rich.
Our rule of thumb is if it's something we haven't seen before, the odds are it's pretty good.
Exactly. Yeah. That's good enough to spend $1 on it. Yeah. Let's see. If the $1,000 hobby box has 100 cards in it, that's $10 a card. And almost none of the cards are worth $10. They're worth $1, and then one of them could be worth $1,000 or more. But people won't do it unless they perceive they have a good chance of having a decent return. And part of that is the enjoyment, the chance of getting a big card. And if there were 10 guys sitting in a row, and each one of them had a box and they opened simultaneously, my guess is one of them would be laughing all the way to the bank, and the other 9 would be some level of disappointment. But it's enough that I could have been the 1 out of 10.
I think this has been going on since time immemorial. This is related to this. My old friends, Hans and Hank, who used to run a store called H&H Hobbies in Garfield, and neither one is no longer with us, but that was a true neighborhood store. They would have 85 tops that they sold back in 85 for 50 cents a pack. The kids or the adult kept the good, and they kept the Mattingly. They may have kept the Eric Davis, but they didn't always keep all the Olympic cards or even Clement. And so a couple of years later in 87, they would leave the cards they didn't want on the counter. H, Henry and Hans would keep the cards. They would sort them. They would do various things with them. And when McGuire became a $12 card in '87, they had a backstop of them ready for sale that people wanted. So left this on the counter 2 years ago. Now you want it? You could have just kept it then. But that's what I'm saying. For 40 years or more, if it's not a hot card, people have been
At the
treating it
time, not a hot card at the time.
not a hard card.
And they're not willing to be patient. I think you're willing to be patient. I'm willing to be patient. Patience is a virtue. I think the hobby's not long on patience, but
It's not long on
people
patience
that are patient, I think, do better in the long run.
in the long run.
In the long run.